Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So in our previous session, we were discussing the ways of a worldly mind or a person who is infirm in mind, who is not resolute. And that's the description given in the Gita, verse number 42 to 44, which compares a restless or a non-resolute mind or an infirm mind with worldliness. So it's not just evil actions that make a, or material desire for a material life that makes a person attached to the world, but if his mind is restless, whatever be the reason, if the mind is restless and he doesn't have what is known as Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, we discussed it in the previous class. I'm just recapitulating what that verse was trying to point out. Sri Krishna is trying to point out that unless one has a Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, means a one-pointed mind. What do you mean by one-pointed mind? Not just the reactive mind. As you know, Vedanta divides our mind into two broad categories. One is manas and buddhi. Buddhi is the discriminative mind, the mind which makes choices in life. It's not just a reactive mind, which we share with the other animals to a certain extent. Most of the animals, they have a highly reactive mind, sometimes more sensitive than us, because they react very quickly. So manas, as opposed to buddhi, is a reactive mind, and buddhi is a mind which deliberates upon the inputs that it receives through the different sense organs and acts accordingly. So it's a mind which is that part of the mind which is known as buddhi. And even among different people, the buddhi varies. So a person who has Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, his mind is one-pointed. So finally it boils down to a concentrated mind, a mind which is resolute enough, which has a purpose in life. But before, as we discussed in the previous class, what are the problems with people who have a mind which is restless? Why should a restless mind be a problem? That's the idea. And why do we associate it with worldliness? You see, you have to be very careful here, because in Indian philosophy, especially the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, it's not just evil actions that make a person unfit for life. It is a person whose mind is restless. That restlessness itself will cause him to make mistakes, him or her to make mistakes in life, take wrong decisions, make wrong choices. So, very often, a restless mind is considered to be that of a worldly person, whereas a spiritual person, the more he progresses in spiritual life, his mind becomes more resolute. That's why they say, Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Ekeha Kurunandana, means he is telling him that, unless telling Arjuna that first the verse number 44, we'll just consider verse number 44. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya aparita chetasam Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadau na vidiyate. So there is no fixity of mind. Vyavasayatmika buddhi, for them who cling to pleasure and power, who are too much, who are running after their own desires, who have no control over their minds. When you run after various desires and whose discrimination is stolen away, literally stolen away, that is how aparita chetasam, those whose minds are not in the right, minds do not function properly because it has been, as it were, stolen by the world. So they are not in control of their own minds. They do not, in fact, possess their own minds. The mind is sold to thousands of things outside. So every desire, as it were, attracts the mind, and the mind loses itself and then becomes restless, and that restlessness is the cause of misery. So, what is the key to yoga? Now, how do we define yoga? Yoga as it is described in the Bhagavad Gita, which enables us to gather our mind, gather our thoughts, focus our mind, develop that Vyavasayatmika buddhi, and make the right choices at the right time in our life. It may appear to be a very easy thing, but it is not. Every moment we make a choice, either right or wrong, and every wrong choice makes us miserable. That has been seen. But why do we make wrong choices? That is the question. And that Sri Krishna is trying to answer. Why do we make wrong choices? Why are our minds not one-pointed? Why can't we rely upon our buddhi, which is Vyavasayatmika, which is absolutely focused, concentrated, and also we use that buddhi to make the right choice every time we are faced with options in life. So the reason is given now. How to open, what is the key to this yoga? That yoga which leads to a sharpened buddhi, a sharpened mind, which enables us to exist peacefully with ourselves and also with the people around us, our surroundings. So we come to verse number 45 now. Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvastho Niryogakshema Atmavan. So the Vedas have described this whole phenomenon. The world has been, according to Vedanta philosophy, or according to the Sankhya philosophy, which is based, on which the philosophy of yoga and also to a certain extent Vedanta philosophy is based. Sankhya forms the foundation. That is why this chapter itself is known as Sankhya Yoga. So one of the foundational principles of Sankhya is that this whole universe is composed of three gunas. That's why the Vedas, the scriptures, the Hindu scriptures enumerate these three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. But the goal is to transcend these gunas and not to be imprisoned by these three gunas. The three gunas of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, all the three gunas bind you. Tamas binds in a different way, Rajas binds in another way, and Sattva also, though it is much more desirable to be Sattvika than Rajasika or Tamasika. Tamasika is the worst. It binds you through, sort of ignorance. As the ignorance increases, you become more tamasic. So from tamas to rajas, that is a stage which a human being normally follows. He starts, even the animals, if you consider them to be tamasic, to a large extent. Of course, they have their own Rajasic and Sattvic gunas. But as the preponderance of the Rajasic and Sattvic guna increases, especially Sattvic guna, a person turns to spirituality. He gives up the tamas. Of course, there will be a little tamas always left. Our whole personality is made of three gunas. Not only our personality, anything that exists in Prakriti is made of three gunas. That's why he says the Vedas enumerate three gunas, Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha. So Vedas say everything that exists in this world, in this universe, is made of three gunas. But the goal of a sattvika or goal of a spiritual person, according to the Vedas, is to transcend this guna, to become three gunatita. Gunatita means to atita, to go beyond these gunas, not be under the influence of tamas, rajas, or even sattva. Sattva also binds. So, how to do it? Nistraigunya bhavarjuna. You become free from these three gunas. How? So, the second line says, Nirdvandva nitya sattvastha. Means be free from the pairs of opposites. Nirdvandva. Dvandva means hot and cold, good and bad, likes and dislikes. In fact, Patanjali very clearly points out that all our problems that we face can be boiled down to two, raga, dvesha, and of course fear, clinging to life, abhinivesha. Among the five kleshas, these three are predominant. So either if you have strong likes, then you have raga, you have attraction towards them. If you have a strong dislike, which is as bad as the like, in fact worse, so that dislike is known as dvesha, raga and dvesha. So he says these two always follow a human being. All our decisions are based on trying to acquire or trying to follow that which we like, and also avoid what we don't like or hate what we don't like. So these likes and dislikes, our whole life is in fact a continuous flow of our likes and dislikes, always trying to follow or try to acquire what we like and try to keep away from what we don't like. So right from childhood, a child is trained, and a person, especially if he has strong likes and dislikes, he is the most miserable according to Bhagavad Gita, because if you are full of dvandvas, that I don't like this, I always like this, so you have strong choices in life, and when you don't get them, when you don't get what you like and you can't avoid what you don't like, then that person becomes miserable. So the only way is to be neutral. That is what Gita says. He says, be free from the pair of opposites. Just be content with whatever comes your way. Sometimes you may have to tolerate something that you don't like, and sometimes you may have to give up what you like. You have to have some kind of control over your mind. Otherwise, the mind will be swaying between likes and dislikes. So, be free from the pair of dvandva. Dvandva tito. Dvandva tito means dvandva titaha. To go beyond likes and dislikes. Then ever balance. Nitya sattva so. Sattva is a quality. Tamas is the force of repulsion. You may say, if you compare the three gunas, and rajas is the force of attraction. If you can consider that, sattva is that which balances rajas and tamas in our life. So ever balance. Sattva is always a sattvic person. Before he transcends the guna, he tries to balance the forces of tamas which are dragging us down, making us inert, making us totally destructive in nature, and then we graduate to rajasic quality, a predominantly rajasic quality. So if there is a preponderance of rajasic, we are very active, we try to attain so many goals in our life, we are hyperactive. So a Rajasic person is always fond of action, he wants to create something, he was very restless as a result. But he is definitely better than Tamasic, who is inert, who is a lazy person. So to balance these two, we need sattva, the sattva guna. So ever balanced, nitya sattvasto, unconcerned with getting and keeping. I mean, whatever you get and whatever yoga kshema, nir-yoga kshema. Here Sri Krishna is pointing out that half of our life is spent in getting things, accumulating things, gathering them around us. And then the rest half we spend in anxiety and worry to keep what we have acquired. So it's yoga and kshema. Yoga means to get through our effort. In this context, nir-yoga kshema means without yoga kshema. So yoga kshema engages us throughout our life. We work very hard, like a horse, work very hard to acquire certain things in life. Most of the things which we may not use, maybe our descendants or somebody else will find some use for it. But we work hard to acquire things. And then when you have acquired a lot, then the question of preservation, kshema, to protect what you have acquired. That's also a big problem. Acquiring itself is a big task. And once you have acquired something in life, you are afraid that somebody else will snatch it away from you. So you try to kshema, that is free from the thought of acquisition and preservation of what you have acquired. So giving that up, nir-yoga kshema, atmavan, be just content with meditation on your own self. A self which is not changing, a self which is not transforming constantly. Because any kind of change, any kind of transformation makes our mind restless. So the only way to reduce our restlessness, try to be free, nirdvandva, free from the pair of opposites, we have to focus on the central principle of our life, of our personality, which is known as Atma. So Atmavan means established in the self. Keeping and centered, our mind centered in the self through meditation. So Prakriti, as Prakriti is the phenomenal universe. So you will find that these three gunas are constantly, there's a play of these three gunas is what Prakriti or nature is all about. Whether it's our nature or whether it is the nature around us. Whether it is a sentient being or an insentient being. According to Sankhya, Prakriti is not just sentient nature, it includes the non-sentient, inanimate objects as well. Inanimate objects have more tamas in them, that is why they are inert, they are incapable of action. Of course, they have their own forces that hold the inert objects in the shape they are in. And then there is reaction. So you will find a lot of inanimate objects also becoming sometimes terribly active. The volcanoes and all the different inanimate objects all over the world, they have their own laws. But here when you say sattva, rajas and tamas, the three gunas which are controlling nature, they are both inanimate and inert, animate as well as inanimate objects, the inert matter as well as the living beings. So to be Prakriti bound, to be bound by this Prakriti, by the three gunas, is not the goal of human life according to this verse. So how to do it? So Sri Krishna now, a series of verses will explain how we can acquire this quality. How can we become Nitya Sattvastha? How can we increase the Sattva guna in our life? Because we are tossed about with this opposite gunas, likes and dislikes, pair of opposites, heat and cold, pain and pleasure, then we have gain and loss, victory and defeat. They are all pairs of opposites. So what's the harm if these pair of opposites are in their life, in our life. We can't avoid it, because wherever there is gain, somebody gains at the expense of somebody else. That's why they say if somebody prospers, we say if some country grows, its GDP increases, we say this country has prospered, but that gain is somebody else's loss. You can't gain something unless it will be at the expense of somebody else. So somebody has to become poor for someone to become rich. So this gain and loss, pleasure and pain. So there is no question of eternal pleasure. Pleasure in this world, in the world of Prakriti, is always changing. Pain and pleasure follow each other. So that's why heat and cold, pain and pleasure, gain and loss, victory and defeat, all these things are known as dvandva. There is a Sanskrit word. Dvandva means pairs of opposites. They always exist together. So when a person refuses to be affected favorably or adversely by this pair of opposites, then he is making some kind of progress in his yoga or spiritual culture. That is what Sankhya, the goal of Sankhya and the goal of yoga, which is based on Sankhya philosophy, the goal of yoga is. So the spiritual, but then how do we do it? So if he gives undue attention to the things that he likes, then when things that he doesn't like come to him unasked, he will suffer. So then there will be this duality in his life. He is happy when he gets things, his raga, his attraction to things that he likes, and hatred or trying to avoid things that he doesn't like. So we're just tossed about. So Sri Krishna says the only way you can get eternal peace or eternal happiness is to get rid of these dualities. So the question is, what happens? Why should we transcend these gunas? Why not enjoy the play of these gunas and just enjoy a life without bothering to transcend? What exactly will happen if we transcend the gunas? So this is a beautiful verse. Very often it's in a figurative way Sri Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna. He is giving an example. It's a beautiful verse which is often skipped because they think it's not important, but it's a very important verse. What do you gain by becoming gunatita? Nistray gunya. Why do we transcend the gunas? What exactly do we gain? Because here we understand sattva guna is there, rajas is there, rajas is acquiring. So it's something tangible that we get in the world that we live in. We avoid tamas, we become rajasic, we become immensely rich, we acquire so many things. So it seems to be a great progress. From the point of view of Prakriti, it is a great progress. Then why do we have to balance both by sattva? Maybe we get some mental peace if we are sattvic in nature after having acquired many things. But then why do we want to go beyond these three? What's the logic? So Sri Krishna anticipates that Arjuna will ask this question, and before he can ask, why should I transcend these gunas? How can that be my goal of life? Should I not be happy with following these different stages from tamasic? We understand that a tamasic person, a lazy person, has to exert himself, become a little rajasic, earn some money, and live a glorious life, a life full of power and glory. What is wrong in that? We are making progress. Obviously we are making progress. At least from tamas, the quality of tamas which is dragging us down, making us lazy, making us violent, and all the things that are attributed to a tamasic life, we give up when we become rajasic. So that's the logical way to make progress. But when we become sattvic, the idea may come to a person that why should I transcend this sattva? After transcending rajas, I become very peaceful. My mind is one-pointed. I am focused. I don't have any dvandvas anymore. I'm trying to reduce it. Why not live in a sattvic life? Why should I transcend it? What do you gain? So the answer comes, anticipating this question from Arjuna. Krishna is saying, Yavanartha udapane sarvata samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanatah. Means, a beautiful example is given. You see, there are so many water bodies. Say there is a pond in a village or in a town, and there's a huge flood. The river starts flooding, and everywhere there is a flood. You can't distinguish from plain land and a pond. Everything is inundated by water, by the flood waters. So you see everywhere there is water. Wherever you stand, you can just take some water and have. You don't have to go all the way to the pond to get that water. So he says, to an enlightened person who has transcended the gunas, it is something like the whole town. If he is in search of water, if there is a flood everywhere, and that flood is the supreme attainment. That is why Swami Vivekananda once said, the only scriptures in the world which tell you that you have to go beyond scriptures is the Vedas. Every other book or every other scripture tells you have to be bound, you have to listen. These scriptures have a tremendous importance in your life, but you can never ignore them. Whereas the Vedas say, once you have acquired the knowledge, once you have understood the essence of the scripture, the Vedas themselves say, Tatra Veda Aveda Bhavati. Means when you reach that stage of realization, the Vedas which helped you to reach that state themselves have to be thrown away. They become Aveda. They become irrelevant, in the sense they are no more useful. Just as when there is water everywhere, the pond becomes irrelevant. There's a huge flood. Now you don't have to go anywhere to collect water. Earlier, when you were searching for water, you had to go all the way, take water from that pond. Samplutodake means the whole land is full of water. So now you can take a jug and take water anywhere. That is what is meant when Sri Krishna says, when you realize, when you get something which is like flood water, when the water floods the whole area, then you don't need a pond. You don't need limit, you don't even need the Vedas. So it is evident that when there is no other way, we have to go to the pond to get water. Likewise, when the Vedas say that when you have reached a state beyond Vedas, you have transcended the Vedas, you can afford to ignore the pond, because the pond has got merged in those waters. So that is Brahma Jnana, where you are free from Prakriti. Then you don't need Sattva Guna. You have transcended. That is the idea. So Sri Ramakrishna used to give a beautiful example. So it's a crude example, but it is very, it conveys the point nicely, how this verse can be explained. So Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel, he says, the courtesan of a prince who has a prince connected with her, the courtesan of a prince heeds not the courting of a beggar on the street. She'll simply ignore, because she has a prince as a paramour. So the courtesan of a prince heeds not the courting of a beggar on the road. Similarly, one who enjoys Brahma Jnana will not and enjoys that wonderful joy, that eternal joy, unalloyed joy or bliss as it is known, of salvation. He does not care for the smaller joys, earthly joys and enjoyment. That is what is the purport of this verse. That when there is water everywhere, then you don't Your small ponds, big lakes, everything gets submerged. So they have no use for us. So that is what transcendence means. So Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna that you are not giving up the pond water, nor you are giving up, you are ignoring the lake water, but because there is flood everywhere, when you have full knowledge, then you don't go after petty things. That's the idea. So, now we come to the next verse, verse number 47. This is Sri Krishna explaining the goal. Why do we have to transcend the gunas? And now how to do it? Now this is because we saw that in the third chapter, you will find Arjuna is terribly confused. We have not come to the third chapter, but he is a bit confused because he is not very sure what path. On one side, Sri Krishna is telling him to fight the war, to continue doing his dharma, continue working. And here he is telling such a big philosophy which makes him renounce everything and go to which gives him an idea that what's the use if the whole town is full of water, then I don't have to look for ponds. It's my fighting this battle is like looking for a lake, looking for water. But if I have that supreme knowledge, why should I do these lower things? But because he has not reached that stage where he can give up dualities, he is still bound by dualities, he still believes in dharma and adharma, he still believes that he has to fight a victory, a justified victory, which his cousins had grabbed the kingdom from him. So as part of the dharma yuddha, he has to fight. So the dualities are still there in Arjuna's life. That's why Sri Krishna gives him a graded method to transcend. You have to transcend the gunas, but right now, because you have to still acquire a little bit of Rajoguna is there, he is tremendously active, very active, he is one of the most powerful generals, war generals. So you are still Rajasic, you have to reach Sattva and then think of transcending it. So how do you do it? Because he has to do his karma. Sri Krishna has told him right in the beginning of the second chapter that you are like a coward. If you run away from battle now, the whole world, and it's not good for you because you have trained yourself for this karma. So you have to gradually transcend it in a graded way, not just give up karma and renounce everything. So how to do it? In 47 verse, karmanne vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbo mate sangostva karmani. So how to do it? So seek to perform your duty. You perform your duty, transcending will come later on. Because he is worried that Arjuna may simply say, oh, if I have to transcend all these gunas, let me give up everything and go to the forest and do nothing and meditate. He knows that he is not fit. His personality is not fit as not sattvic enough. He has still a lot of rajas left in him. So he says, seek to perform your duty, but do it in such a way that you reach that state of yoga. He says, but do not lay claim to its fruits. See, you have to gradually work your way out of this mess that you have found yourself in. You have created this, your gunas have made you a kshatriya, you have to fight a battle, you are in the midst of a war, a battle, and you have to slowly raise yourself not by giving up the battle, that would be hypocrisy. You have to fight the battle and slowly transcend it. But if you fight in the way I show you, Arjuna says, then you will be able to give up this work, give up this karma. So karmanne vadikaraste, just remember this idea and then you will slowly transcend it. Because you have the right to do karma. What is your dharma? You have to fight. Whether you win or lose, don't bother about it. Ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't bother about, don't be attached or inadvertently focused on reaching the goal. Many of the students, they have been told by their guides, their teachers, and even their parents to keep the goal in front of them, which is not a good psychological method. They just keep on pasting, and then setting goals becomes so important that half the time they are looking at the goals, they are dreaming about the goal. Dreams have to be there, but once the goal is ascertained, one has to focus on the means, not the end. Swami Vivekananda in the Karma Yoga, his book Karma Yoga, it's like a commentary on this verse. He says, very often we don't succeed because the goal is so much uppermost in our minds that we forget the means. The end is so, it attracts us, the end that we are seeking to attain. The goal that we are seeking to attain is so attractive, it consumes all our energy and we don't focus on the means. If the means are right, the end has to come. So that is what Sri Krishna is telling him. Don't bother about don't be anxious, because this anxiety and this worry about reaching the goal or not reaching the goal will actually deplete our mental energy. So he says, don't bother about the fruits. Not that you should not put efforts to reach the goal, but you put efforts, but don't be concerned and keep on worrying and being anxious whether you will succeed or not. You may or may not succeed, but don't bother about it. You do your duty, and if you do work in that way, in this way, then you will not be producing any further karma. You will be doing your work, you will be exhausting all the past karma, and that is how you will transcend the gunas. But at the same time, by constantly doing the karma, you will be avoiding inaction, avoiding becoming tamasic. So you are rajasic, you have to aspire to become sattvic, a balanced person. So for that balance to come in your life, you have to continuously do work, not in a rajasic way. A rajasic person is always bothered about the goal. He always wants to win. He doesn't like to lose. So he doesn't have a sporting attitude in life that at any cost I should win. That exhausts a person. That is not karma yoga. So he says, don't be anxious about the results. Just go on doing your duty. That will also prevent you from being inactive. But at the same time, your action will release you from the effects of that action. You see, everything, the law of karma is law of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. But if you do it in a detached way, if you do it as a duty, without bothering about the results, then you are not bound by that karma. That is what he is telling him. So, Sri Ramakrishna used to give a wonderful example. He had his own way of explaining these wonderful truths. He says, there are two ways. A boat can be on water, or water can be in the boat. A floating boat, if it has holes, or if for some reason if water enters the boat, you have to immediately remove that water. So if a boat can be on water, but water should not be in the boat. So that means you can do work, but don't let the work overwhelm you, and the desire for the goal or desire for results overwhelm you, just like water entering the boat. It drowns the boat. The right place for the boat is that the water should be under it. If the water enters the boat, so a boat is good if it is floating on water, but no water should be allowed to get into it. So man may live in the world, but if he lives in the world with lot of worldly desires, then it overwhelms him, it drowns him. That's the idea. That just as a boat gets drowned when the water is in the wrong place, the right place for the water is below the boat, not inside the boat. But how does this happen? So it's in different stages. Sri Krishna is trying to explain how this particular state of yoga is to be attained. The real yoga, I mean Sankhya Yoga. Each of these chapters, as I have told numerous times, each of the 18 chapters are different yogas. So Sri Krishna is now talking about Sankhya Yoga by transcending the gunas, because Prakriti, the three gunas of Prakriti are part of the Sankhya philosophy with which they explain the whole creation, and to transcend it is also yoga. Then by doing karma is Karma Yoga, the third chapter. In the fourth chapter, fifth chapter, sixth chapter, we have Dhyana Yoga. So attaining to yoga through meditation is Dhyana Yoga. So all the 18 chapters, you may say, are different means and ways how one can attain yoga. So now he is giving a beautiful example. This is one of the most famous verses of this second chapter. Yogastaha Kuru Karmani. Do work. How? By being always with yoga as a foundation. Yogastaha. Stha means sthana. That is making yoga as a foundation. You do all your work. Don't do it haphazardly. Do it as a yoga, as a karma yoga. Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Sangam means giving up at all attachment. If you are inadvertently attached to the results, then while you are doing work, even while you are doing work, you will be always thinking of the results, and that will be making you spend a lot of energy which you could have used doing the work perfectly. Because every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes you are thinking of the goal, whether you will reach the goal. That anxiety is actually reducing your efficiency. That's why he says at the end, perform all actions, O Dhananjaya, being fixed in yoga. If you do it without yoga, and if you do it with a lot of attachment, then, and being even-minded in success and failure, that is another way. Siddhya Siddhyo. Not being too much attached, whether you will attain Siddhi, whether you will succeed or you will fail. It doesn't matter. Samo Bhutvat, considering success and failure as the same. Not bothering too much. Doing your best but not bothering about success or failure. Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. The samatva, the equilibrium that you are able to attain, is known as yoga. Uchyate means is explained as yoga. The definition of yoga, yoga has many definitions. In this verse it is samatvam. So equilibrium, equanimity. It's not equilibrium, equanimity of the mind. It's a mental state. So equanimity is yoga. So if a person has equanimity in his life, he does everything without inordinate attachment or likes and dislikes. He is a well-balanced person, full of sattva. For him, samatvam, that equanimity itself is yoga. Steadfastness, equilibrium or steadfastness. That steadfastness which doesn't make you, in which you don't fall a prey to emotions, strong emotions of likes and dislikes. If strong likes and dislikes motivate or influence your actions, then it's a very big, very difficult stage, or maybe it's a very difficult to even maintain your balance. Samatvam doesn't come if you have inordinate likes and dislikes. If you do something without any emotion or without any inordinate attachment to the results, then your work will be perfect. That is really known as samatvam, every action that is done with equanimity. For example, they say most of the doctors, surgeons don't do surgery on their own children because there is this emotional attachment. They ask somebody else to do it. What's the reason? Because they are so attached that I may kill my child, something may happen. That fear, that anxiety makes them not focus on the operation. But if he is not attached, if it's a patient who is a neutral person, he doesn't even know that person, he has no connection with that person, then the doctor can do the surgery properly, because he does what he knows best, what he does it in a very skilled way without unnecessarily being attached to the result, whether the operation will succeed or fail. Whereas if the son or the patient is the son of the doctor, he will very often refuse to do. He will rather say, will tell another surgeon to do it, because he says, the moment I see my son in the operation theatre, my equanimity will be lost, because my attachment or attraction towards that feeling that he's my son, if something happens, he'll die. Whereas if he's a neutral person, that's why he says the yogi has to do, that is samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam means to do with a lot of equanimity. Equanimity is also known as dhairya, or it is also known as a dhira. Dhira, there is a beautiful word which is not easily translatable into English. It's there in the Kathopanishad, which is one of the important Upanishad, where you will find a lot of ideas from the Gita. So the young boy Nachiketa goes to Yama and wants to ask certain questions, and he wants answers to those questions. Yama is the god of death himself. So if there is any question about immortality, about death, what happens after death, and how one can attain immortality, which is more important, this young boy goes to Yama himself, said, you are the god of death, you can tell me what exactly death is, what happens after death, and what is immortality, if at all there is an immortality. So there a word comes where Nachiketa is trying to explain, Yama is trying to explain to Nachiketa, after testing this young boy, he was first of all surprised, because he proved to be wiser than his own father. He pointed out certain mistakes. His father was very ritualistic. He wanted to go to Swarga, which we discussed in the few verses before. That people who think that heaven is an extension of the worldly gains that they have done, and one will be very happy in heaven, it's a mistaken concept. Because no matter how beautiful heaven is, still it is temporary. It has to end one day. So his father, Nachiketa's father, was doing some yajna, some ritual, with the hope of some kind of benefit in this life or after death in the life beyond, that is Swarga. So Nachiketa was, though he was just 14 years and was a disciple of his father, he pointed out that I think something is wrong in what you are doing. These rituals are not going to take you to heaven, or even if they take you to heaven, you are not going to get peace. You only taught me the scriptures, where these things are all at the most temporary. So why are you doing this? So he tried to question his father, and he got angry, and then he asked him, he cursed him, he had to go to the king of death. He said, anyway, I was not very satisfied with the rituals that you are doing. So anyway, he wanted answers to all these things. Is there a heaven? If at all there is heaven, what is the nature of heaven? What happens to a soul after the soul dies? So there were many questions. And after Nachiketa, who was hardly 13 or 14 years old, goes to Yama, Yama sees that he is a wonderful student of spirituality, and he is really keen. He knows the essence of the scriptures. Whatever he has learned from his father, he has understood the gist of what the scriptures say. So naturally, he is a fit candidate for the supreme knowledge. So Yama tells him, only a dhira, this is what samatvam yoga uchyate means, only a dhira, a man of steady intellect. Dhira means, it has come from the word dhairya, that is, dhairya is a quality where one is even-minded, is steady. He is not, no matter what happens in his life, or the pair of opposites come, he maintains his equanimity. That is, he is a yogi. Yogatva, samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatva means this equilibrium, this quality of a dhira who is always steady, no matter how many ups and downs come in his life. He doesn't lose his equanimity. So that is what is meant by samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga itself is defined in Sankhya Yoga as equanimity or as dhairya or as a dhira. So the nature of the mind itself, according to Sri Krishna, is that one has to be, one is one becomes elated when there is success and becomes terribly disappointed if there is failure. Equanimity to remain unperturbed in success or in failure results in mind having tremendous clarity and firmness, which is the quality of a dhiraha. Kaschid dhiraha antaratmanam aikshat. That is what Kathopanishad says. There are some people who are rare, like Nachiketa. Who is a dhira? Why is he dhira? Because he is steady. He is having that equanimity in his life. He is not just bothered. He is not following the crowd. Just because somebody does, my father is doing some ritual, I just follow him blindly. No, he had the guts to question his father and tell him that there's something wrong that you are doing. You think you will be going to heaven, but by these rituals, and you want to extend your enjoyment, whatever you are gaining, but all this is temporary. In fact, there is a test which Yama tempts Nachiketa, this small boy. He says, you don't ask this question about immortality. It's too difficult for you to understand. You are just a small boy. Take this, I am giving you some boons with which you can become a very rich person, you can be the emperor of the earth, whatever you want you take. But Nachiketa doesn't lose his equanimity. He says, I don't want all these things, because the scriptures themselves say that these temporary things will give you, but ultimately you will succumb to death. No matter what I do in life, the things that I gather around me, they are not following me after death. Tell me what follows me after death. Do I have to work like a horse and earn so much of money to just leave it behind at the stroke of death? He said, I am not going to be tempted by your argument or tempted by your boons, tempted by your offer of wealth and all, because I know I have examined that, and after having examined the nature of those things, which my father unfortunately did not understand, I have come to you, and don't think that I am going to be tempted by you. So I keep those horses, the wealth, everything to yourself. Tell me exactly, give me the knowledge for which I have come here. I want something which will make me immortal, which will make me attain eternity or attain the soul. If there is a soul, I want to see it. If there is, I want to know what happens after death. I just don't want to be born again and again and try to live a temporary existence full of likes and dislikes, full of sorrows and miseries, full of but then seeing his determination, samatvam, seeing his samatva, which this young boy had even before getting the knowledge from Yama, even before acquiring the knowledge, he says he is a right person. He is not perturbed by all the offers, temptations that I am throwing at him. So he says, now since you are a rightful candidate, now I would take you as a disciple. And he says, such dhiras, such people are rare. Kaschid dhira antaratmanam aikshat avrutta chakshu. So only some people have that inclination to get rid of all these dualities and transcend the gunas. So, but how to do it? Now, Sri Ramakrishna, I will conclude with this. Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example. You see, he has in the gospel solved these abstruse problems. It's very easy to say just be detached and keep on doing your work. If you tell a student, he will say, am I mad to not to bother about the results? It is so misunderstood, this karmanyevadikaraste, that without bothering for success or failures, how can I pass an exam? I should have some motive which will make me struggle for success. How can you say that you have to give up this idea of success, that strong motive? How can equanimity be better? Though Swami Vivekananda says half our energy, mental energy, is expended just thinking about what will happen if I fail, what will happen if I pass, if I succeed in this endeavor, in my exams, in my endeavor, in my life, in my business. So that worry, anxiety for something which is unknown, which has not yet happened, but just the anxiety is killing. And as a result, you are not focusing on the means. The end is so alluring, so attracting us, that Swami Vivekananda says you have to focus on the means. If the means are right, the end will come, the goal will be attained, success will be there. But don't think of success or failure now. That's just wasting your energy. But how to do it on a day-to-day basis, and I'll end with this. He says, Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example. He says, in those days, even today, in India, every rich person had a servant. They had quite a few servants who would do all the routine tasks. People used to employ them, and obviously the maid servant, they were mostly maid servant because they had to mix with women. So normally it would be who herself would be a mother. She has her own family. She has to look after her own family. But because of poverty, she has to earn. So Sri Ramakrishna says, have you seen the maid servant of a rich man's house? For all intents and purposes, she claims her master's children and the house as her own, because when she comes to the house, she temporarily assumes charge of the small children whose care she has to. She is a carer for those children because that is her duty. The maid servant calls that child of the master of the house. Either his name is Hari or Rama or some name. She thinks he is her own. She thinks he or she is her own child, and then does everything what she would normally do to her own child at home. But at the core of her heart, Sri Ramakrishna says, at the core of her heart, she is doing everything just as she would bring up her own child or take care for her own child who is at home. But this child is not hers. Knowing fully well that this child is not my own, she remains firm in that attitude and does everything that she would do, but there is no attachment. In the heart of heart, there is no attachment. He knows that after all, this is not my child. Though I will do everything, but she does perfectly because she is not emotionally attached to that child. She does it as a duty. So seemingly worldly things, seemingly people who own worldly things, if they don't have attachment to those things, but deal with those things, like King Janaka. King Janaka was the father of Sita. He was a Brahmagyani. So he ruled a huge kingdom. Mithila was his capital. So he used to rule that kingdom, and he said, I am least bothered if tomorrow there was a fire and it burned the whole Mithila to ashes. I would not be disturbed. With that Brahmagyana, he ruled Mithila, he ruled the kingdom very wisely. He was a king, but he was not attached to anything. Similarly, the maid servant can say that this is my boy, this house is mine, but the moment the master says, the master of the house says, now you are dismissed, she has no regrets. It's not she's leaving her own house or her own children. If her husband throws her out, she'll suffer. But if the master says, you don't have to report for work tomorrow, she can go because she is not attached. Though when she was employed, she fully took care of the child, but she was not attached. She knew it's not my own. So she can relinquish that attachment to that property and do all the work that she normally does in a very detached way. So this is how yoga, karma yoga is to be practiced. So we'll conclude. It's almost 1 hour. Yeah. If there are some questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll conclude for today.
Thank you, Swami. Very good.
Yes.
So just when you say, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, he's talking about one kind of yoga.
Yeah.
That
Yogastha Kuru Karmani. Yeah, this is for the Sankhya.
What is he telling me to do?
Yeah, without jnana, yoga doesn't come. See, Sankhya yoga means yoga based on knowledge, a proper understanding of the principles. The question is, I'm repeating for the benefit of the online people. So, the question that you have asked, if I have understood properly, that Yogastha Kuru Karmani, that is definitely a desirable thing, to do karma with full equanimity and without strong likes and dislikes, without being affected by dualities. So then what is jnana? So jnana is the set of ideas that help you develop this equanimity. Karma yoga is actually doing it. But to do it, you need a working philosophy. You see, if you have a lot of philosophy, if there is a lot of jnana, the intellectual appreciation, that is what was discussed in our previous class. He says people go on reciting these Vedas and having a lot of academic discussions and think that they've understood everything. They might have understood intellectually, but experientially, you have to experience those truths, you have to practice it. So the idea should not remain frozen in our brain, having no use. We do a lot of studies. We do study Upanishads, Gita, all these ideas are there. But unless it is practiced, that is why he says the Vedas give a lot of importance to develop this equanimity, which is what the jnana portion of the jnani yogi has to use his wisdom, his mind, his buddhi rather. Mind is a lower state. Mind or manas is a lower state. Buddhi is a higher state where you can distinguish between good and bad, between Shreya and Preya. All these things come if your buddhi is refined. So, Vyavasayatmika buddhi we discussed in the previous verses. So, with that Vyavasayatmika buddhi, developing that Vyavasayatmika buddhi is Jnana Yoga. And when you use it in doing your duties with equanimity, it is Karma Yoga. So, definitely there are many yogas. As I said, there are 18 yogas, but broadly you have 4 yogas. That is, one dealing with the thinking capacity of the mind, of your personality. Another bhakti yoga, that is devotion, which deals with the emotional aspect of your mind, emotional aspect of your heart, dealing with the heart. People have a lot of emotions, so how to transmute them into yoga, that is bhakti yoga, which we will discuss in the 12th chapter. And then there is people who are very active, they have a very strong will. So for them, karma yoga, because they can't, they're like Arjuna, for example, he was just very keen to fight this battle. So he has, for him, karma yoga is the only way. He has to first subdue, to enter the state, but do it with jnana, with the little bhakti which he had for Krishna or his Ishta, the God whom he worshipped, emotional attachment. So all the four faculties of the mind, and the fourth faculty is dhyana yoga, which is restraining the mind. That is another faculty which a human mind has. So thinking, feeling, willing, willpower, which is karma yoga, and then restraining the mind, which is dhyana yoga. So all the four yogas, they have to be practiced together. Though they come in different chapters, but you will find there is this, all the four yogas are always there in some hidden form.
I have one question. Like you said during the course of teaching that we should not focus more on goals but on the means to achieve
Means,
it.
yes.
So, like with my limited understanding, like means what, like if I won't focus on the goal, likely that I may not achieve it, because if it is in my mind that I have to achieve goal, I may be thinking day and night about it and maybe working to achieve it. So what is wrong in my thinking?
No, the thing is, it's not that you should not have a goal. You have misunderstood what I said. The question being asked is that if that goal is not uppermost in our mind, what is wrong? I mean, if it is uppermost in our mind, what is wrong? As I said, when you have the goal, once you have fixed the goal, you're definitely working towards the goal. So then the means become important. Now you have to focus more on how to attain that goal rather than thinking of the goal. If you constantly remind yourself of the goal, then what happens is a part of your mind or your energy, mental energy, is spent in daydreaming or thinking about the goal, which can be put to better use by focusing on the means. End is there, and you know, oh, I have to stand first. Then suddenly your mind will say, okay, if I don't stand first, or if I don't get the minimum marks, then what will happen? A student will always think, suppose I get a few marks less. So we try to imagine something which is not happened, which is just eating away our energy, mental energy. So that is why it is dangerous. So there's no, once the goal is fixed, you know that is the goal. So you know what are the means. So why not focus and put your 100% on the means? That is karma yoga. That means you focus, and you said now you forget. Anyway, if your means are right, the goal end will be attained sooner or later. But you don't have to bother about it. Otherwise, always thinking, oh, if I fail, then your mind will lose its vitality or energy. That's the idea. Okay? Yes?
I was thinking about these ideas in the Gita. Vivekananda talks a lot about the importance of learning Sanskrit.
Who?
Vivekananda.
Yes.
Vivekananda. And I've studied Sanskrit for many years. And,
Okay.
I find the Gita within the Mahabharata and also like Kalidasa's Kumara Sambhava very exciting. And I was wondering, so I learned about the depth of Hinduism and Sanskrit through learning Sanskrit.
Obviously, yes.
And I was thinking, Sanskrit is, in my opinion, easier to learn than most people think.
Yes.
And
If you have the patience.
Yeah. Is it possible to bring this exciting tradition, this exciting literature, like Gita, the Mahabharata, Kumara Sambhava, to the people? So I offer a free Sanskrit class.
Oh, very
and
nice.
I find people very receptive and they can learn very fast. And if that's possible, I was wondering your opinion. If you thought that, this is possible to share this with Indians and Westerners, and I'm American, because actually Westerners don't know much about Mahabharata hardly at all, or Hinduism, or Advaita Vedanta, or anything. I think it's time to share it, right?
Definitely. The translations do not give you a very clear picture. Yeah. It's always better to focus on the original language in which it was written. For example, Bhagavad Gita is in Sanskrit. It's in classical Sanskrit because it is a much later Sanskrit, whereas Vedas follow a different grammar, which is Vedic Sanskrit. It has Nirukta and some grammatical knowledge of the Vedic grammar is necessary. So that is a different Sanskrit. So that Sanskrit also has evolved. But fortunately, there are advantages and disadvantages. They decided to, because if you leave the grammar and allow it to just keep on changing, then it becomes very difficult. So Panini was the father of modern classical Sanskrit. He wrote all the sutras. He said, no, you have to follow these sutras. All the Panini sutras. He made it into a very scientific grammar, which he said now. So all the classical Sanskrit becomes easy to understand because it follows Panini. The moment you break it, your work is not recognized. Whereas in Vedas, it's much more difficult to understand because the Vedic grammar was so creative. It had its advantages. It's a very creative language, Sanskrit, the Vedic Sanskrit. But unfortunately, people are not there. You need bhashyas. You need somebody to write a commentary on that to understand what the words mean. So it's a very complex, but as you said, there are many words in Sanskrit which cannot be translated into English. For example, Shraddha, faith. Shraddha is not faith, though we translate it as faith. Faith can mean belief, whereas Shraddha has more than faith. It is faith based on conviction. So the Shraddha is made, you can go on explaining what this word Shraddha means. But for that you have to go back to the etymology, that is the root. The roots of Sanskrit, they are very scientific. Dhatus, they are known as. So most of these dhatus from that words are created, and depending on the context, the meanings change. So the same word can have 10 meanings depending on the context. So it's a very difficult language, but it is definitely worth learning. So that's why we are even planning an online course with the collaboration with the All Souls College of Oxford University. We have our own university in Belur, that is RKM, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational Research Institute. They have a full-fledged Sanskrit department. So we are now trying to collaborate with the Oxford All Souls College, that is the Department of Asiatic and that is Oriental, Asiatic and Middle East Studies, where they teach Sanskrit. So a syllabus will be framed by our university and recognized by Oxford, and at the same time it will be made simple and it will be graded. There will be different levels of Sanskrit because it requires a lot of patience to learn Sanskrit. But it is worth studying. Worth doing.
Is that through the? Is that going to be through the Ramakrishna Vedanta?
Yes, Ramakrishna Vedanta Center. That is going to be the overseas very soon. We have not signed the MOU with Oxford. So that our university vice chancellor is coming here in June. So we hope to sign a memorandum of understanding so that we can make it accessible to not only to UK people, anywhere in the world, because online it is very easy to learn online rather than attend the classes in person, which is very difficult. People don't have time, so you can learn online. So when it is announced, I will inform. Terry will be there, so you be in touch with Terry. Yeah. You live in Newcastle?
Yes, I do.
Oh, very good.
I'm doing a PhD in now. So,
yeah, I'll let you know. In June, we are probably starting something.
Thank you very much for the answer. And if anyone's interested in my free Sanskrit course,
yes.
Let me know. It's fun.
Yes.
It's very fun. Sanskrit's fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. Otherwise, it can be very difficult. Yeah. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.